Okay, let's get into today's stories because these stories are the type of stories that hit you deep in the gut. And not because of romance, because oh no, it has nothing to do with romance, but because of family freaking entitlement. And I know you know what I mean by that. Because society really pushes the family first motto, but sometimes family first really means that you are left in the wind and that your feelings do not matter. And that's what today's stories are all about. They're the type of stories where people believe that they have say or power over your boundaries, your home, or even your wedding. Yes, you heard that right. We're talking about ownership, control, and obligation, all dressed up as love. So get comfortable because these stories, they get a little bit messy. So let's jump right in there to the first one. Am I the asshole for throwing them out of our house that we own? Son and future in-laws decide to exclude his family from wedding. They thought son owned the house, not us. I don't know. Okay, this one sounds really heavy, but we gotta really keep reading in order to decide if he's asshole or not. So let's get to it. My wife and I bought a 4-bedroom house in Pennsylvania that our son lives in. Our son went to college in Pennsylvania and wanted to stay in the area. So we bought the house as a second home. We live in New Jersey and we commute into Manhattan for work. We figured that he would have a place to live and we could visit every so often and spend some quality time together. Okay. We pay the taxes and services, maintenance on the house. Our son pays for the groceries and the house utilities. Okay. All was going well for a few years. Our son meets a girl and they get serious. We met her and she seems nice enough. They announce their engagement and she moves into the house with our son. Okay. Now for the problem, the wedding. We hold a little get to know you barbecue at the Pennsylvania house. My son and daughter are there, as are our son's fiancée and her parents and sisters. We all seem to be getting along well. My wife and daughter and the fiancé go into the house along with the mother and sisters and my son. A few minutes later, my wife and daughter come out and they're really upset. They come over and tell me we're leaving and driving back to New Jersey. I try to find out what happened. Once we got back to New Jersey and they calmed down, they tell me that our son and his fiancée along with her family don't want us at the wedding. According to what I said, we're not their kind of people. I was livid. I called my son and I asked him what the hell this was about. He tells me that her family feels that we are not good enough and we will embarrass them at a family wedding and that we are all uninvited to the wedding. I let a week go by to calm myself down and drive back to the house in Pennsylvania. The new future in-laws are in the house along with the fiance. It appears that they have all moved into the house. They ask me why I'm there. Wow. I tell them that since we aren't invited to the wedding, I am coming over to talk to my son. They tell me to leave their house. I lost it and told them that they have 30 days to get out. Tell my son I'm selling the house and he can find somewhere else to live with all of you. Okay. I go to a realtor in town and list the house for sale. He ain't playing. They call my son at work and tell him what I said. Apparently, they thought that he owned the house. He calls me and asks me, why am I selling the house? I tell him I paid for it along with the taxes on it and it's mine. He was living there rent-free, but since he doesn't want us in his new life, he has to get out. Okay. I tell him the same as I told his future in-laws. They have 30 days to get out and I'll get a lawyer and get them evicted. Am I the asshole for taking a hard stance on this? He is my son, but the in-laws seem to take over and we no longer count. Okay, oh my goodness, because that was a lot in that story. So let me recap it a little bit so that I fully understand what's going on here. So you and your wife buy a second home in Pennsylvania. You live in New Jersey, work in Manhattan, and you let your son live in that Pennsylvania house rent-free. You pay the taxes, the maintenance, everything on it. He covers the groceries and the utilities. Okay, makes sense, sounds okay. He's living in that house, you're not. So of course, cover those things. So life's fine. Then he meets a girl. That girl moves in, they get engaged. Okay, that sounds normal. That's a normal progression in a relationship. Okay, sounds about right. And then let's fast forward a little bit. You host a barbecue, the get to know you type. So both families can meet. Seems like everyone's smiling, everyone's getting along, but then minutes later, your wife and your daughter come out of the house in tears, clearly upset. So what do? Of course, you ask, what happened? And they tell you they don't want us at the wedding because we're not their kind of people. What? Say what now, huh? How the heck did they even come to that conclusion in the little amount of time that you were getting to know them at this getting to know you? Like, did they just walk into that room and look at you and decide, hey, yes, you all seem to not be assholes and you're welcoming. So yeah, therefore we have decided that you are not our kind of people. Please help me make sense of that. Like, what happened there? So then you drive back home in shock because, like, how could you not be in shock? So then a week later, after you've had some time to calm down, you go back to that same house that is owned by you, and the fiance's entire family has moved into your home. What? What kind of people are they? Because it seems to me like they seem like the type of people who use people. Okay, so then when you confront them, they tell you to leave their house. That's crazy, because it must be really nice to live in this Delulu world, because how did that even become their house? Did they think in their Delulu world that they bought this house? Okay, so then you remind them that you own the dang thing, and they argue with you about your home that you own, that they have zero rights to. What? So then you give everyone 30 days to get out, which I might say that is super generous of you. And then you list the house for sale and you say to them, if I'm not good enough for the wedding, then I'm not good enough to fund your lifestyle. Which, if it was me, I probably wouldn't have put that so eloquently, but you did, so good job on you. But yeah, no. And now you're sitting here and you're asking, was that too harsh? Man, what? Let's talk about what's actually happening here. Because dude, you didn't just take back a house. What you took back was your dignity, okay? And this right here is not an example of some type of miscommunication, or maybe you heard something wrong. They were dismissing you in your own freaking home, or they were trying to take advantage of you, or really maybe they were trying to take advantage of your son. And the sad part is that he is allowing that to happen. And these people, they didn't just uninvite you out of discomfort. They are full of shame. And that right there is the reason why they uninvited you. Shame doesn't always project downward. And when people experience shame, they usually try to hide the thing that they feel ashamed of. So in order to do this, if they can make you feel small so they don't have to face their own insecurity or how they feel about themselves. And I am so sure that they have feelings about themselves. I mean, look at the facts here. They are grown-ass adults, parents of grown adults, really, and they are having to move into the home of their son-in-law. That right there is very telling about maybe some of their choices in life have not been the best. Those choices in life had landed them to this place where they are having to move into their soon-to-be son-in-law's home. That right there, it has to feel very heavy. Maybe, I'm not sure. And for people, it can be so much easier to say someone else is the problem instead of taking ownership of their own problems and working on them and fixing them. So yeah, I would say the entitlement here runs deep with your son and with the future in-laws. Because really, any rational person who doesn't feel this huge urge of entitlement would know and believe that generosity does not equate to ownership transfer. They do not have a right to your home just because they are living in it. And this right here, the situation is their reality check, because life doesn't work that way just because you feel entitled to something. And when you gave them that huge dose of reality check, they called that cruelty. But what you were doing was creating a boundary. But boundaries can sound like cruelty to people who are entitled or full of shame, or to people who have lived off of your lack of boundaries. So your question of, was this too harsh? My counselor Lynn says that it wasn't too harsh. It was about friggin' dang time and good for friggin' you. But let's talk about what that means for you, because if you have ever felt betrayed by someone that you loved or that you love, you know that wound runs friggin' deep. And on a whole nother level, if you've been betrayed by your own child, you know that wound right there doesn't just cut deep. It reopens every freaking old wound. And it really does sound like the poster here is suffering from some betrayal trauma. And how could he not? When you continuously invest in someone and they treat you as if your feelings do not matter, that right there, that hurts. That can be so friggin' painful. And now what he's left with is grief. The grief that his kindness was mistaken for weakness. Grief about the fact that his relationship with his son might not be what he thought it was. Grief about what he thought the future of their relationship would look like. Grief about the family system that he dreamt about, the one that probably included his son, his future daughter-in-law, and possibly his future grandchildren. Grief over the fact that this is his son, the one that he taught, the one that he raised to be loyal, to be kind, to ground himself. And then that same child that he taught all of these things chooses someone else's version of family over his. That right there, that has to hurt. Then there's the grief over his own choices, his judgments, and his own ability to recognize the truth. Because betrayal trauma not only has you questioning the person that you feel betrayed by, but it also causes you to question yourself. And betrayal trauma can feel like it's on this huge cellular level where it fundamentally changes your physical and biological state, especially when the betrayal comes from your own child. Because that right there isn't just normal rejection. It's complete disorientation. It can feel like you're losing your role, your purpose, and your sense of identity all at once. And then let's take a step back and look at the son. I don't think he's malicious. I think that he's enmeshed. And when you're enmeshed, you lose yourself. You lose your identity, your feelings, and your own needs in someone else's orbit. And enmeshment can happen if you've been taught to keep the peace at any cost, even if keeping the peace means betraying the person who taught you what love was supposed to look like. Enmeshment can also happen when someone craves belonging so much that they fuse with whoever promises approval the fastest, even if that approval costs family loyalty. And that right there, that's the trap of enmeshment. You really can't tell the difference between loyalty and survival when you're enmeshed. And then let's take another step back and let's look at his fiance's family. What they're displaying is a superiority complex, which is really just masking their inferiority, because superiority is not about power, it's about panic. It's what happens when people are terrified of being exposed. The superiority complex is really how people protect the fragile parts of themselves that cause them to believe that they'll never be good enough. So the fiance's family saying that the son-in-law's family is not their kind of people, it's not about them. It's about the fiance's family's fear of being ordinary. So now let's take a look at what we got here. We got a father drowning in betrayal. We got a son lost in enmeshment. We got a fiance's family performing perfection to hide their own wounds. And somehow everyone's fighting for control when what they really need is connection. Because isn't that right there the real heartbreak? Everyone's sitting here trying to win the wedding and no one remembers that they're supposed to be building a family here. I mean, isn't that what weddings are about? And what you're hearing here really is something that we see all the time in family systems. And we call it the cutoff with control, which it looks like independence on the surface. The adult child saying, I'm just setting boundaries, I need space. But underneath, it's not him really becoming an individual. It's emotional blackmail that is disguised as growth. What happens is the individual severs the emotional relationship, but keeps the material benefits of connection. They'll reject your influence, your perspective, your presence, but still use your resources, your money, your name, your emotional labor. And that's right there is where it gets twisted, because cut off with control is a way of saying, I want the power of adulthood without the accountability of it. It's what happens when people mistake detachment for healing. They don't actually resolve the dependency. They just rebrand it. So now, instead of honest dialogue or mutual respect, you get distance paired with dominance. And that's not boundaries, that's control. Because becoming a true individual doesn't require punishment. It allows you to differentiate yourself and to still respect others. It means that you can disagree, but you don't have to destroy to prove that you have grown. And boundaries, they're a tough thing, but they don't have to destroy relationships. They just reveal which ones were conditional. So the poster wasn't being vindictive as a father. He was matching energy. And I want him to hear this clearly. You don't owe access to people who revoke respect. Not your son, not his fiancée, and not her family. You gave your son a home, he gave you humiliation. You didn't throw him out of his house. You reminded him that it was your house. And there's a big difference between control and consequence. Because here's the truth. You weren't trying to punish him. You were trying to protect your peace. And if you were in my office, I would ask you one question. When did your generosity stop feeling good and start feeling like debt? Because when that shift happened, that was a moment that you started losing your peace. And that was a moment when love turned into obligation. And that was a moment that when your giving stopped being mutual and started being manipulated. That was a moment when your kindness got weaponized and your home became a stage for their superiority. And that right there is what cutoff with control really creates. It takes love and it turns it into leverage. It punishes the parent for finally saying no. But the reality is you're not cutting him off. You're ending the cycle where you're expected to fund your own disrespect, and there is nothing wrong with that. Let's turn to some of these Reddit commenters to see what the commenters had to say. One person said they thought he owned the home. That tells you everything. And that's exactly right. Entitlement really thrives in delusion. Another commenter said, you'll regret cutting off your son. Maybe that's true, but regret is lighter than resentment. You can rebuild a relationship later, but you can't rebuild self-respect if you sell it now. So to answer your question plainly, are you the asshole? My answer is no, you're not. You're just a man who is enforcing consequences. And it's okay to love your son and still say that you will not finance your own disrespect. And that's not punishment, that's parenting with boundaries. There's nothing wrong with that. Because love without accountability isn't really love at all, it's enabling. And sometimes the hardest part of being a good father is realizing that you protecting your peace doesn't make you cold. It doesn't make you hateful. What it does is it makes you healed. Because healed people don't chase acceptance. They choose alignment of their own peace and their own self-respect and their own healthy boundaries. Healthy, healed, aligned people, they don't beg for closeness. They build relationships where safety is mutual and it feels calm, not chaotic. And they understand that distance isn't revenge, it's recovery because it's a way for them to rebuild peace, to regulate their own emotions, and to reestablish self-respect. So maybe, just maybe, this Reddit story wasn't about a father losing a son. Maybe it was a story about a father who finally realizes that love built on guilt will never lead to peace. And speaking of family entitlement, let's talk about the other kind, the emotional kind. Because the next story is about a woman who's finally getting married and her sister-in-law who believes her miracle baby deserves the center stage. It's a different family, but with the same type of issue, which is control disguised as love. So let's jump into that Reddit story to see what we got. Am I the asshole for not letting my miracle baby niece be the flower girl at my wedding? Well, this title sounds a little rough, a little mean, but let's not judge yet. Let's dive into this so we can get the full story so we can make an assessment here. My 27-year-old female older brother and sister-in-law, both mid-30s, just welcomed their first child a year and a half ago. After years of trying, after many failed attempts, sister-in-law was told that she wouldn't be able to conceive due to a medical condition that she has, but they finally got pregnant. Since having my niece, the baby has been the center of attention at every family event that we've had since she was born. Birthdays, weddings, family get-togethers, you name it. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my niece, but it can get a little bit too much when my sister-in-law goes on and on about how long they try to conceive, complications that they've had, miscarriages that they've had, etc. like a little too much info. Many family members have commented on how it's a little bit excessive, but no one has said anything because they don't want to sound like an asshole. Anyway, I'm getting married in the spring, and my brother and sister-in-law approached me last weekend about having my niece be the flower girl. Okay. Now, my fiance, 35-year-old male, has 2 children, a 10-year-old male and a 6-year-old female, from his previous marriage. His son is one of his groomsmen, while his daughter asked me to be the flower girl when we told them the news that we were getting married a year ago, as it's something she always wanted to do. So of course, we said yes. So I explained this to my sister-in-law when she asked me about my niece. She asked if my stepdaughter can just carry my niece with her. I said, I don't think she's comfortable with that considering she's 6. So then she asked why I can't just give the role to my niece and allow herself to carry my niece down as a flower girl. I said no, because I already promised my stepdaughter. Okay. She then started going off about how my lack of effort to incorporate my niece is disgusting to her. I should honor her in some way since I know how long and hard they tried for my niece. Now, I may sound like the asshole here for this, but I kind of got fed up with it and snapped and said, incorporate my niece how? By the time the wedding comes around, she'll be 2 years old. The entire family already knows your story about how long and hard you guys tried for her. What more do you expect me to do to honor her? She started crying and said that clearly I don't love my one and only niece and that I'm letting her down. I said, of course I love my niece, and obviously she's going to be involved in pictures and stuff, but I'm not going to let my stepdaughter down by giving my niece a role that she's too young to remember anyway. Well, now my sister-in-law and my brother are pissed off with me for not letting my niece be the flower girl and are running around telling the rest of the family that I don't love my niece. My mom had been trying to stay neutral, but thinks that my stepdaughter would understand if I explained to her that I need to give the role to my niece. I'm firm in my decision though, and my fiance is so thankful that I didn't let his daughter down. Am I the asshole for not letting my niece be the flower girl? Okay, let me recap this one so I don't miss anything. So you're 27 years old and you're getting married in the spring. Your fiance, he has 2 kids from a previous marriage, a 10-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter. That's a little girl, your future stepdaughter, who asked you a year ago if she could be the flower girl, where of course you said yes. Why wouldn't you? And of course she's thrilled about that. Why wouldn't she be? Then enter your brother and sister-in-law. So after years of infertility and heartbreak, they finally have a baby, which is amazing. Congratulations to them. That's awesome. Everyone calls her the miracle baby because it really does sound like she truly is a miracle. But now this is where it gets a little bit sticky. Your sister-in-law comes to you and says that your niece should be the flower girl at your wedding, where you get to choose who gets what role because it's your wedding. Yes, hello. So then you try to explain gently that your stepdaughter has that role at your wedding and her father's wedding. And then she says, well, could your stepdaughter carry her baby down the aisle? A 6-year-old carrying a 2-year-old down the aisle? What? Did she really think that went through? Because I can tell you for sure, I would not want a 6-year-old to carry my 2-year-old child down the aisle. 2-year-olds can be little chunky things. They're heavy. And what if that 6-year-old drops her? So anyhow, now you say she's 6. She's probably not comfortable with that, which, yeah, of course not. She's probably not. So then, fine, she asked if she could just carry her daughter down the aisle as a flower girl. And what was she thinking? To just kick the 6-year-old out of her role that she was already given and that she was already excited about? What? She's someone else's precious baby too. Why is she treating her that way? That's awful. Okay, so then again, you say no. And suddenly now, you're this heartless human being. So she cries and says that you don't love your niece and tells everyone that you're jealous of their miracle. Maybe does she think about this one, that maybe you're just trying to be a good stepmom and you're trying to keep your word that you gave to your stepdaughter? Like, could that not have been an option here? No, of course not. It's because you're heartless and you don't love your niece. It really baffles me, the narrative that people tell themselves and that they make up in their head. Gosh almighty, okay. So now you're standing here wondering what just happened and if you're the asshole for not letting your niece be the flower girl at your wedding because you already gave that role to your stepdaughter. Say what? Let's talk about what's actually happening here, because you are being tested on where your loyalty and love lies. And oh, baby girl, you failed that test because you were looking at it from a logical mindset and you were looking at it like it was a request, but it definitely wasn't. Your sister-in-law was not asking for inclusion on your big day. That doesn't matter to her. What she was demanding was recognition. And you didn't recognize her because you probably have already done that 1,000,002 times. And now, since it's your big day where the recognition and the decisions should be on you, but your sister-in-law's nervous system, it does not recognize that. Come on now, do you not know that? And that's because your sister-in-law has turned her whole entire identity into being a mother. And any moment that does not revolve around that identity can feel like rejection to her. And her nervous system perceives that as a threat. So at this point, you are rejecting her entire being, or at least that's how she's feeling. And that sweet little baby of hers, she represents years of loss, years of fear, years of hope, years of medical trauma. And that right there, that can mess with a person's mind and put them in this scarcity mindset where they feel like every moment needs to be about their child, the child that they thought they were never going to have. And because of this, your sister-in-law does not recognize the difference between her fear and her pain versus her child being the center stage. And that's because her child is the center of her everything. And her nervous system isn't letting her forget that, not for a single friggin' moment. So when she said, honor my miracle, what she really meant was that she wants you to validate her pain. But the truth is that it's not your job. It's not your job to regulate her feelings or emotions. It's not your job to validate her pain, even though her pain is completely valid. But let's talk about what that story means for you. Because if you've ever been the one holding everything together, the strong one, the responsible one, then you know that kind of strength, that comes with guilt. The guilt of saying no, the guilt of not fixing it, the guilt of realizing that being the peacemaker often means losing your own peace. And that right there, that's the wound of guilt. And some people who carry that wound, they hate being misunderstood. So what do? They over-explain. They keep trying to make people see their heart, even though they've already decided who you are. And the sister-in-law, that's grief that's turned into possession. She's not just protective, she's terrified because in her mind, if her miracle baby is not celebrated constantly, then all that suffer that led to the baby starts to feel meaningless. And that's not malice, that's fear in disguise. And your brother, he seems like he's the avoiding one. And avoidant people, they really feel like conflict can feel crueler than connection. So they enable people, hoping to keep the peace and hoping that keeping that peace will hold the family together, when in reality, it just tears families apart. And the deeper layer here is that motherhood after infertility can awaken trauma responses like crazy. Trauma responses like hyperprotection, identity fusion, and sometimes even competitiveness that masquerades as advocacy. So it's not about ego, it's about survival. It's the nervous system's way of saying, if I don't control it, then I'll lose it. But when love turns in control, it stops feeling like love and it starts feeling like fear wearing a friggin' crown. And every family has a main character type of season, but emotionally healthy people, they know how to share the stage. So you weren't rejecting her child, you were keeping your promise to your stepdaughter, a little girl who finally feels like she belongs in this new family unit. And that promise that you made to her, it matters because breaking it wouldn't have just hurt her feelings. It would have taught her something that can be extremely dangerous. That no matter how kind she is, she'll always come second. So what you did, you didn't exclude someone. You protected someone. You didn't create conflict. You created safety. You protected a child's security. And that's not selfishness. That's love. Let's turn to some of these Reddit comments to see what some of these commenters had to say. One person said, just let the miracle baby be in the picture. And that's a perfect middle ground. It's inclusion without erasing anyone. Another commenter said, you could have made both girls flower girls. And maybe you could have, but not if that demand came with manipulation. Another commenter said, she's projecting her loss onto your boundaries. And that is exactly right. Because when pain goes unprocessed, it becomes entitlement. And entitlement always targets the most empathetic person in the room. So to answer your question, are you the asshole? I'm gonna say, no, you're not. You're the only adult in the room who remembered that weddings are about commitments, not comparisons. You didn't dishonor their story. You just refused to make it your storyline. And that right there is what emotional maturity looks like. Because emotional maturity is understanding that someone else's pain does not give them permission to rewrite your joy. You set a boundary that protected a child, that honored your word, and kept the focus on what a wedding is supposed to represent, which is unity, not hierarchy. Because real love, it does not need to steal the spotlight. It knows that it is the light. So as you can see that these two Reddit stories are siblings. The first one shows financial entitlement. And the second one shows emotional entitlement. They're different dynamics, but the same exact wound, which is people mistaking access for ownership. As you can see, they confuse generosity with obligation. They confuse love with leverage. They confuse the support with submission. But here's the truth. You can love people deeply and still say no. And by saying no, it's not selfish. Because healthy love doesn't demand access. It respects boundaries. And it knows that protecting your peace does not make you distant. It makes you dependable. And when you get to that point and you've learned that, then you stop performing for approval and you start living in your own alignment. So weddings can pull every hidden thread in a family system. Money, control, attention, it all surfaces. Because as we all know, weddings aren't just about love. They're about lineage. They're about loyalty. They're about the roles that people refuse to outgrow. But here's the thing. The goal isn't to keep everyone happy. The goal is to be consistent and to be congruent. So if you're planning a wedding right now and everyone's got opinions, repeat this to yourself. I'm not planning a performance here. I'm creating a memory that reflects who I am becoming. And I want you to remember that. Because if someone can't celebrate that, then they should just go home. Because peace at your wedding should not be a luxury. It should be the standard. And the next video is the final video of the wedding series, and it's a heavy one. We're talking about betrayal, loyalty, and closure. We're talking about a father who skipped his son's wedding to stand by his ex-daughter-in-law and a bride whose future mother-in-law wore her wedding dress behind her back. And in those stories, it's about what happens when love and loyalty collide and the courage that it takes to choose integrity over acceptance. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. I'll meet you there.